Hey, so what we are going to do in this video is go over the next steps for the watercolor and mandala project. So in the last video on watercolor techniques, if you remember, I showed 3 different techniques that you can use with watercolor. Now, those aren't the only ones. If you wanted to try some other ones, there's plenty you can look at online. One of the first ones I did, I think, was the wet on wet. So that is what this looks like when it's dry. And if you remember, that is where you paint your paper with water first and then apply the watercolors, and they kind of flow right into each other. I also did one where I added some plastic wrap on top of the wet paint, and you can see a little bit how it gives it some texture. I think I needed to have my paper a little bit more wet for it to really show up. Same with the salt. It gives it texture, but you have to make sure that your paper is really wet for that to work. I did do a sample of what the background is going to look like, and the salt technique worked really well because I added a lot of water to it. So in the watercolor packet that I made you guys, you should have a piece of paper that is this size. It's 9 by 12 watercolor paper. So this is what we're going to be doing the actual project on. That is after you have finished the color mixing chart. It looks like this. Obviously mine isn't finished, but yours is going to be fully filled in. So with this piece of paper, you are creating the background for what will have on it drawn mandalas with the Sharpie I either provided for you or you have at home. So I'll show you the background I created, and this is it. So I did a lot of the like wet on wet technique where I painted water onto my paper, and then I applied the watercolor, and I made sure to use colors that I know will mix well together. And that's something that you kind of learn from the color mixing chart techniques that work. Okay, so blue and purple and red, they all mix well together. And then I had the red flow into the orange, into the yellow and the green. There are certain colors you just kind of don't want to mix unless you are trying to make, let's say, a more muted tone. Like if you wanted to do kind of like an army green rather than this this green, you can mix like orange and the green. You'll get that kind of hunter green, army green. You can play around with the colors. Now I did rainbow. You can use whichever colors that you would like in yours. I also used the salt, and I'll put this closer up just so you can see. So it left this texture, the little tiny spots. And then the way that I got these larger spots is when the paint was still wet, I took my brush and I applied paint to it. And then what I kind of did was I went like this and tapped it. And then I got those like splatters of the paint. So like I said, there's tons of different watercolor techniques that you can try if you would like to. So once you have this, first step, you have to wait for it to dry. It has to be completely dry before we do anything else. The next step, we are going to be drawing a mandala or mandalas. And you're probably like, what is that? Well, a mandala is a symbol of the universe. It's something that has been used in many cultures throughout time. And it is basically just a circular design that is radially symmetrical, meaning that on either side or all sides of the circle, it looks the same. So you can find inspiration for mandalas and ideas for them online. I will be providing some resources. But one way you can start is by taking something that's like small and circular just to get the inside, or the if you want to have them going off of the page, like I'm probably going to do a few different size mandalas, maybe have like one bigger one over here and a couple like coming in from the corners. So one, I have like a little circular thing here. I'm going to, just so you can see it better, I will do this on a blank piece of paper. I'm going to trace this. So I have something that is round to start with. And I'm starting with pencil rather than with Sharpie. You can always go over your lines, but you know, it's easier to erase pencil, of course. You can't erase a Sharpie. So if you start with something like this, start with pencil, and then I'm going to start drawing some design. So you'll see kind of what it looks like. I like to make up my designs, but again, like I said, you can look online for inspiration. I will provide some links where you can find mandala ideas, but let me just draw a few things so you kind of get the idea of what this looks like. It's similar to the Zentangle that we did earlier on in the year, where it's patterns. It's just in a circular format. So with my one in the corner, I started with kind of a floral looking motif. Now I'm drawing some circles. You can totally use stencils or trace things to enhance or make your design work for you. And you kind of just keep adding layers to your mandala until you feel satisfied that it is something that you like. So once I finish drawing this a little bit in pencil, I will lift it up so you can see what I've been working on. Again, this is me just making it up without looking at any kind of reference. So this is what I have so far coming from the corner. And I can bring this out as far as I want. I can take this one in the center and start with it. I might want to add like a smaller circle in the middle and then start from there. So that's what I'm going to do. And you guys have definitely seen mandalas before. I know that they are currently very popular for people in college. They like to get those tapestries and hang them up on their walls. Typically, they feature a mandala. If you have ever been to some kind of Catholic church, usually they have something called a rose window, and it's a stained glass window, and that is an example of a mandala. So it is not something that should be completely new. You might have seen them plenty of times before, and you just never realized what they were or knew. So I started this one, I started adding some designs. I'm going to continue, and you can just kind of add to what you have. Like I said, you can have as many mandalas as you want on your paper. You can have one large one that takes up the entire center, or you can have a whole bunch of little ones. You can have one coming from each corner. It is totally up to you. This is your design. Like I said, your background can look however you want it to look, giving you lots of freedom with this, because you're learning watercolor techniques, you are learning different ways to mix colors and what happens when you mix those colors, and you are learning how to draw mandalas. And rulers might come in handy for the mandalas if you're drawing any kind of straight line. Again, circular objects for tracing. You don't have to freehand it all. I'm, again, just doing that for demonstration purposes and to make this a little quicker. And I'm not going to have it completely finished, but I will have an example at the end of this all for you to see. So again, I'm just adding things onto my mandala as I go. And what you'll be doing eventually, once you have it all drawn out in pencil, if you're happy with it, what you can do is then either use the, this is just a felt tip pen, same thing as a Sharpie pretty much. If you have one of these, you can trace over your lines. If you have a thin Sharpie at home or a thick Sharpie, really doesn't matter what you trace over your lines with, as long as it is some kind of permanent black pen. If it's something where like you're coloring in certain sections, you might want to use a thicker Sharpie for that. And for small things like in this design, I have little dots. I'm obviously going to want to use something smaller so that I can get those details. So this, again, I will show you some resources for the mandalas, but the first step is to use those watercolor techniques. And again, you can research different ones. Like you can use rubbing alcohol and put little droplets on it. It'll create a different effect. So there's things you can research. You're going to make a background first, wait for it to dry completely before you start doing any kind of pencil drawings of mandalas on it. So that's pretty much it for the rest of the watercolor projects.